Dear students, today uh, I'll be talking with you about the peasants' uprisings in India. I'll be giving you lecture right from the period of the British Raj till today, because today the hot topic, the most important topic, not in India, rather all around, it is the farmers' agitation in India, particularly in the most parts of the northern India. Firstly, I would explain you the meaning and the difference between the peasant and the farmer. The peasant uprising means the farmer who's tilling, the peasant who's tilling the land in the fields, and he's not satisfied. That is why he's going against the administration, asking for his rights. Peasant is that one who doesn't owns any implements, where the farmer owns all the implements. During the British Raj, there were various uprisings. It was, first of all, the Indigo movement in 1859 1860. Then the Dakhan riots, 1874-75. Then Ramosi uprising, 1877-87. No revenue movements, 1893-1900. Then Birsa Munda's Ululan, 1899. Then Rajasthan uprising, 1913 to 1917. Champaran, which is in Bihar, Satyagrah, 1917. Then Kheda Satyagrah, 1918. Both this Champaran and Kheda Satyagrahs were led by Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. And these two were against the Jamidars. Champaran Satyagraha, which is in Bihar in 1917, it was the indigo workers who were asking for their rights. And Gandhiji sat on dharna and compelled the authorities to accept the demands. Kheda Satyagraha, it was in Gujarat. The same issue was there. Mahatma Gandhi sat on dharna and compelled the authorities to accept the demands of the peasants. Then Bardoli movement in Gujarat, 1925, in which Vallabhbhai Patel was leading the movement. Gandhiji joined it and gave him the title Sardar, and he's popularly known as Sardar Patel. Then Mopala rebellion in Malabar in August 1921 against the Hindu landlords. These Hindu landlords, they were called Jinmis. Then peasant revolt in Telangana against Nizam of Hyderabad. The Communist Party of India initiated the Telangana peasant struggle in 1936. Then Tibaga movement in Bengal. Tibaga literally means the 3 shares of the harvest. It was started in 1946-47. It is believed that the present agitation which is going on, and it is supported by the 250 million people of India and world, and is the largest in the history of the humankind. In August, the government of India introduced the 3 ordinances. The first is the Farmers Produce Trade and Commerce Promotion and Facilitation Ordinance 2020. Then second is the Farmers Employment and Protection Agreement on Price Assurance and Farm Services Ordinance 2020. The third is the Essential Commodities Amendment Ordinance 2020. And against these 3, ordinances, the present agitation is going on. The heads of Canada, Australia, England have shown the sympathy with the agitators. Even Secretary General of UNO, Antonio Guterres, have supported the protesters. In Canada, England, USA, and Australia, huge protests are seen. If we look at the plight of the farmers, it is shown in various writings by these novelists, the writers, historians, and even in the movies like the Mother India, Do Biga Jameen in the past. In the early years of 20th century, on the same lines, one movement was launched in Punjab. That is Pagdi Sambhal Jatta Hoy, Pagdi Sambhal Jatta. There's a difference of opinion that who composed this song. Some scholar says it is Banke Dayal and some says Ajit Singh. The song and the movement both are different. There are a lot of similarities in the agitation of the present movement and the movement which was 100 years ago launched by the peasants and the farmers. This shows that farmer is still facing the same problems which he was facing 100 years ago or more than centuries ago. So now I'll try to compare this agitation with the agitation of the early years of the 20th century. A 1907 ballot made a quiet comeback over a century later to inspire the protesting Punjab farmers who have dig in their heels against the center in the gates of the Delhi. Pagdi Sambhal Jatta, a song which was written in the past at a peasant rally in Lalpur that year in 1907. Lalpur is in Punjab, West Punjab, Pakistan, and presently Lalpur is known as the Faisalabad. It soon became an anthem which defined the farmers' agitation against 3 British laws in 1907. And those laws were the Doab Bari Act, number 2, Punjab Land Consolidation Act, and the Punjab Land Alienation Act. At that time, the 3 laws were there, and even now in 2020, the agitation is against the 3 laws. This unrest was led by Bhagat Singh's uncle, Ajit Singh, who continued to inspire the current protesters who refused to budge in their fight against the union government. Farmer unions, part of the going protests in Delhi, claimed that farm laws passed by the parliament will ultimately force them to sell their land to the corporates. It was a similar cause that fueled the farm protests in 1907. Almost the same agitation and the same grievances. Earlier, the grievances was against the Britishers, the foreigners, the rulers, but now it is against our own people. Farmer felt threatened by the Colonization Act that they said would reduce owners to contract workers on their own land. Farmers, especially in and around district Lalpur, who were given forest land by the British to develop, were being told that the government will take back the allotted land under the Act. As unrest started growing against the colonial rulers, Bhagat Singh's father, Kishan Singh, his uncle Ajit Singh, and their revolutionary friend Ghasita Ram had formed the Bharat Mata Society. with an ultimate aim to spark a revolt against the Britishers. Over 100 years ago, just after the Lala Lajpat Rai addressed the gathering of protesters, farmers on March 3, 1907, Banke Dayal had read out his historic composition, Pagdi Sambhal Jatta. Just now I have told you it was the difference of opinion, perhaps it is by Ajit Singh. The song not only defined the agitation but has since got embedded in the Punjabi psyche as a chant of resistance in the fight for one's honor, even against instrumental odds. Just like farmers protesting today, activists back in 1907 had decided to first read the bills thoroughly before protesting. In his autobiography by Ajit Singh, and first plan, which was to study these bills and understand them fully. With protests, Punjab farmers activists would organize meetings at different centers in Lahore from morning till evening. Those meetings were addressed by mostly the Kishan Singh and Gazita Ram. And activists were sent to Lalpur district to explain to the public the harm these mayors would do to them. The same thing happened since last 2 months in Punjab by the agitator farmers. Punjab and Haryana have emerged as the nerve center of these protests. The epic center of the 1907 agitation was Lalpur. Ajit Singh wrote in one of his writings that I choose Lalpur district as our center for agitation because it being nearly developed area, it had people from almost all parts of the Punjab, as also retired military people. Retired military people thought could be useful in bringing about a revolt in the army. Another interesting parallel is that the British had made minor amendments in the laws after seeing the resentment in the public. The same thing has happened in the last few meetings between the government and the agitated farmers. The government is ready to make some amendments. The Narendra Modi government too seems willing to consider the farm laws. In this article published in the Daily People, in 1931, Bhagat Singh wrote that public meetings was called in Lalpur on March 3, 1907. Even Bhagat Singh have written about this revolt in his writings. According to Bhagat Singh, just before this meeting, Lalaji told Ajit Singh that government has made some amendments in the Colony Act. In the gathering, while thanking government for this amendment, we should request government to cancel the whole law. However, Ajit Singh made it clear to Lalaji that the agenda of the meeting was to inspire the public to stop paying agricultural taxes. Ajit Singh writes in his biography, Lalaji was first hesitant in addressing the meeting, but people shouted that they were anxious to listen to Lalaji. Seeing the public enthusiasm, he made one of his finest speeches, full of eloquence and spirit. The same way we saw in the past in few days that a lot many people have given the speeches to the agitator farmers, the religious leaders, the farmers leaders, and even some singers or some other important personalities of India. Ajit Singh had noted that earlier Lalaji was not willing to join the agitation based on the assumption that this was not limited to the farm unrest. This, he had noted, was true, as the real aim of the movement was to ignite the revolt against the Britishers. That is why this movement is termed as the peasant come revolutionary movement. The farmers' agitation this year, that is 1907, has remained largely non-violent. The British, however, had to face violence in 1907. There were riots in Rawalpindi, Gujranwala, Lahore, and the other parts. British personnel were manhandled, mud was flung at them, officers and churches were burnt, telegraph poles and wires were cut. In Multan division, railway workers went on strike, and the strike was called off only when the acts had been cancelled. The superintendent of police, Mr. Philip, in Lahore, was beaten by the rioters. British civil servants sent their families to Bombay, and ships were chartered to take them to England if the situation got worse. Some families were transferred to forts, wrote Ajit Singh in his writings. He further said that Lord Kitchener got terrified since peasantry was becoming rebellious. Military and police were unreliable. John Morley, then Secretary of State for India, made a statement in the House of Commons that in all 33 meetings in Punjab, out of which 19 were addressed by Sardar Ajit Singh, that increase in the land revenue was not in the cause of the unrest. It was with a view to finishing British rule in India that it was being used as a political stunt. The result of all this agitation was that all the three bills were cancelled by the British government. The major difference in the agitation of the 1907 and the agitation of 2020 is that up till now, the agitation of 2020 is completely peaceful and it is nothing to do with the politics. Whereas the agitation of 1907 was full of revolution and having some acts of non-violence. Thank you very much.